So today's panel is devoted to governance or administration of campuses. Why? Maybe some of you noticed that in the first session of our conference we were talking about why campuses are essential. In fact, so we heard that they are creating new heads, requalifying old heads, having a task of innovation, a commercialization of innovations. But there are a lot of tasks that we are expecting from campuses, but which have not been carried out yet. The most successful situations most oftenly do not result from one campus. Mostly these are campus centers of campuses. There is a critical mass needed, and there are innovations, high achievements in research in this critical mass, and the territory thus becomes attractive to entrepreneurs and other actors. So that's why we are talking about governance. But first of all, we have to understand, for example, how much of you have studied in the university. Big respect. We have the best specialists. How much of you still do study? So these issues are relevant to you right now. How much of you are working in science economy or using your head? Well, we are blooming, I would say. Maybe some of you are so brave as to live in Pārdaugava. Okay, work in Pārdaugava. Okay. And the last, would like to live in Pārdaugava. From my experience, I can say that I have been born in Teika, but I live in Pārdaugava for the last 3 years. My flat for rent, we were tenants in a queue for renting this flat. And Pārdaugava has its charm, and people have started to appreciate that. And we will talk about governance of campuses and that they are able to justify this potential we are expecting from them, and inhabitants, how they should feel here. And now I invite our panel participants, Agrita Kiopa, a Deputy State Secretary Director for Higher Education and Research, Ministry of Education and Science of Latvia. Please, welcome. Toms Baumanis, Rigas Stradins University, Vice-Rector for Development. Artūrs Zeps, Riga Technical University, Vice-Rector for Development. Artūrs Caune, Action Company RB Rail Project Manager. Arvīds Dravnieks, inhabitant of Pārdaugava, lawyer. Willem van Winden, Amsterdam Technical University professor and researcher, and we heard him in the first session of the conference. So, as you see, we have quite voluminous panel, 6 people on the scene. We have solved at least a small part of gender inequality. As you see, we have one lady also. So, our work will be divided by the general question to all of you. Then we will move to case studies or your daily practice. And at the last part, we will ask the audience to ask you questions about what campuses need and so. So the first question is what is the one key element you, from your professional experience, could say that has changed during the last 5 years? And do you believe this conference should really take place every time? What has changed? I have been born in Pārdaugava, grown up in Pārdaugava, and I would say Āgenskauns is changing. It's nice change from the point of view of quality of life. In the professional sphere, I would like to mention that we see that new city infrastructure is being developed there. We see new trams, so the quality of transport, of public transport, is increasing. Will Rail Baltic be in Pārdaugava? I don't know, that's yet in plan. Mr. Baumanis, I would like to emphasize that economical activity is changing in Pārdaugava. There are more traffic jams, more people, more shops, more other institutions demonstrating that initial perception of who lives there in Pārdaugava is changing. So this discussion about the development of campuses in Pārdaugava is just in time. What I see as inhabitant of Pārdaugava, born and grown up in Pārdaugava, academic campuses are actually being developed not only for the last 5 years. Infrastructure is becoming better. It's more friendly for bicycle lovers, and there are positive changes, definitely. Mr. Dravnieks? We are perishing, I would say, that Āgenskauns, that Pārdaugava, where we knew every corner, where we knew every neighbor and greeted each other. We are just dying out, you know. Artūrs, I would characterize it with one word, intensity, but it has as negative as positive aspects. Yes, number of population is increasing, and that could be favorable. At the same time, yes, traffic jams are also increasing, and that makes it more complicated. But this discussion is in time in place right now. Willem?
Centres. We'll get you on a panel once the gears get going with academic centres. Is that okay? Yeah. Good, great.
So on this note, we see serious development. Then there is a new campus developed for students. Riga Technical University plans to be one of the scientist centers in Baltic. You have cooperation with CERN, and you should be proud of it. During the last couple of years, a number of international students have increased by 70% or even 100%, if I'm not mistaken. How do you evaluate this process? How your foreign students feel in Pārdaugava? What can we offer them? Can we really expect that the number of foreign students would be twice the big in 21. Pārdaugava is an interesting place. Also for our European students, there are places where to stay, and that's a good sign, because no place is staying empty. In this demographic emptiness now, we have European students, and they bring us freshness, internationalization. We hear it in public transport, and also, I guess, Riga development could state that from rented spaces. But that's a good sign. If youth is there in the city has future. Well, if we talk about the service hostels and hotels, we have them placed all around the city, but foreign students are mostly living in Tiepsala. But this living question is becoming more topical, and we are working with planning documents, trying to find solutions. Question for the audience: have you noticed foreign students in your daily life? My brother lives on Tarbata Street, and in his staircase, he is the only one born in this country. All the others are German or Scandinavian students. Baumanis, your students prefer the right bank of Daugava. Well, our benefit is that due to economical crisis, these spaces were empty and they were occupied thanks to foreign students. But we have tried to find solution together with Latvian University, Riga Technical University, and the response was close to zero. Therefore, we started to build our premises by our own means. And our hostels are quite decentralized, and we do not have one center, mainly in Zirciema Street, and that's it. Will this housing question be topicality if the number of foreign students is continuing to increase? I consider it a big challenge. Usually in European higher educational establishments, hostels are available, student hostels are available for foreign students up to 15%. It's not the case in Latvia. But we are working right now for opening a branch in Germany. And what is export possibility in Latvia through our two universities? Have we exceeded our expectations? Are we where we plan to be? The both mentioned universities are ones of the best concerning export capability and possibility to attract foreign students. Our Stradins University is absolute champion in this. Riga Technical University is also developing as very natural export provider. And we should not be thinking only about student hostels, but we should think also about rent market, about students' life, what happens around that, and the possibilities of potential work that could be created for students because they are studying here, so they could also work here. So I would also suggest that more enterprises should be located in Pārdaugava in this knowledge mile in order to create this environment which already exists to be productive, dynamic. You stated that majority of foreign students are living in the right bank of Daugava, and you suggest that they should be in the left bank of Daugava. But is this real? Can we achieve that? Do you have entrepreneurs coming and asking, do you have offices for rent, places for rent? Yes, very regularly. And that is the idea. We want to implement some kind of innovation center, innovation concept that gives possibility to those companies dealing with innovations and technologies to be close to our campus. That would bring added value. And by that I mean that really we are not going to rent spaces for some company X or Z, but companies dealing with innovations, with transfer of technologies and knowledge, with companies having potential to engage young people. Do you plan where it could be? In Ķīpsala, near to Zunde, or in Ķīpsala? three-step development. Now, currently we have already 100 square meters existing infrastructure in our existing campus called Design Fabrika. And during the next 4 years, we have planned to make the first stage of Science Innovation Center in the space of 700 to 1,000 square meters in order to see how we are moving on. And currently we are actively working on development plan of our infrastructure, and one of its development is Science Innovation Center, 5 to 10,000 square meters infrastructure. Mr. Zeps, do you have demand or you expect to have demand? We have a regular demand. As I stated, the companies, if they had the possibility to rent premises in our campus, they would do that immediately. Unfortunately, since there are a lot of EU funding invested also there, we have no possibility to offer them in the amount they want to. Mr. Baumanis, hospitals, big hospitals in Pārdaugava, can we talk about them? We have contractual relationship with them. It's a successful cooperation, but it's limited. We know what is the situation in our health care. We need structural reforms there. We also have good cooperation with Riga Technical University, and we want to develop further on. We earn money, and by that money we buy parcels of land towards Riga Technical University. You say buying out lands? Yes, but we have received a lot of support from Riga City Council. They also presented us like a gift some parcels of land. We can make pharmacy, lab activities, sport activities in the park. We have ideas, and thanks to support of the Riga City Council, we can realize them. But still, closer relationship, cooperation with the technical university. What we are talking about, actually? Or is it a commercial secret? 5 years plan, 3 years plan, incubator, accreditation, premises, labs. What kind of cooperation, harmonization? We have started with common curriculums. We have granted degrees, common degrees. We facilitate cooperation of students. We also look for solutions for hostels. And I would say it's not a future, it's already a reality. We have already concluded such kind of contracts a couple of years ago, and we are implementing them. And we are also speaking about, like I said, hostels or dormitories. I understand that the future belongs to cross-disciplinary cooperation, but it could be logistical, so not to create for each university its own campus, but you can have the hostels and dormitories and sport premises and other infrastructure in one place that could be used also by local inhabitants, not only students. If you are creating your separate campuses, then the public transport will become more overloaded with the traffic, more traffic intense. Any comments? that we open premises of universities for local inhabitants. Why your German students, girl students, could not be friends with our boy students? Why not? Of course. Yeah, but I mean, there is like a swimming pool, which is sort of meant for students, but all local inhabitants can use that. In the case of RTU, we also see building intensity and maximum height. And at one moment, there will be limitation also for sports building. What about optimization of resources, good governance, smart specialization? Okay, we see bright future, but I'm afraid that I can not actually disappoint you. We are great in specialization, and what we see in a Riga conference and today, we are more civilized. We are starting to talk, and we have taken concept with great potential in the field of governance. And we really understand that this innovation mile, innovation campus, common campus is in its development, early development stage. When talking about governance, we are in a fantastic time, space, and moment because we have a choice. There is nothing formalized yet. And it would be nice to look at everything like a network. A lot of speakers touched upon that. On a network of organizations and people, and we should look at those noodles of networks, at those actors who participate. And it was emphasized that it is very important to have enterprises, multinational, local, startups, students, organizations, everything. But what was not mentioned, but what is very important is that there is something binding all of this together. Leader forums, for example, where John meets Artūrs, and there are also managers of multinational companies joining them, and they make strategy how this place will be developed. Forums with local inhabitants of Pārdaugava, like Arvīds, who is saying that Pārdaugava is dying. So we are saying now Pārdaugava is not dying. We are participating in direct purchase organization. I want to die in Agenskalns. Okay, we understood this is necessity. If we see any new institution, we need a new culture, how to cooperate. And therefore, I would like to give the floor to the person who is one of the biggest players in this territory, Mr. Wills. Thank you. Hello. I can maybe start with the fact that the name Anchor was mentioned. And some time ago, it was mentioned that our library will be the anchor of Riga. And we wanted to develop it as a science and education center, but we have also researched and studied what happens at the moment when such kind of libraries are built, not only in Riga but in Paris and other cities. And according to these researchers, we have developed a national library not to be only as library, but being registered as a scientific institution, as a learning institution. That was our direction. And in practice, that means that currently we have cooperation projects which initially seemed that there will be only rent relationship projects, but it's not. We are working on a joint mechanism with Eastern German Research Center, with Culture Center. We have ICT cluster, we have cooperation with the Mission Possible and other academic institutions, not only university, but also with RISEB. We are related with Stradins University. A lot of readers are coming to us. A technical university with which we have a cooperation agreement in digital science. We also support those digital labs with academic forces together. So we see not one village, one campus, but we see this mile, and we feel that we can be actively involved in that. We are also a gate to this new Riga, to this academic city. Therefore, we care a lot for a connection between the left bank and right bank. And transport solution and Akmen's bridge solution is very important right now, because currently the dominating operators in the traffic are trucks with logs, with timber, and we should release this mail from redundant things, from things that are disturbing us. And finally, about the bank, we have no access to river from old Riga side. We have there, but we don't have in our bank. So we need to find that solution, not to be a place where there are only skyscrapers which are empty, but this place should be attractive all 24 hours. Thank you.
Transports sasniedzami.
Yes, transportation, accessibility. Mr. Caune, you work for a project where at least 3 ministries from 3 countries cooperate. What could you say to us? What are your recommendations as regards such big projects, their management? Yes, Viesturs, as regards the Rail Baltic project, I could say that on the European scale, our project is quite special because it is normal for us to create large projects, but in this case we are talking about a project that will connect 3 or even 5 countries, and we have a joint company here, and there are parties who are implementing the project. Currently there are 3 countries represented in this project. Yes, this seems complicated. Indeed, you could say so. We have to solve different tasks. We have to face different challenges every day. And if we're talking about our area, we are not talking about transportation only. We have different cultural differences, language differences, different approaches to planning. Mr. Caune, Madam Kiopa already told us about the necessity for the academic centers to become territories of knowledge. What are the preconditions for such territories or areas of knowledge to come into being? In this case, if we talk from the perspective of our project, of Rail Baltic. The coordinating company is our company, RB Rail, and as regards the implementation of concrete projects, it is important to create an institutional mechanism. Okay, what do those mechanisms mean? That would mean something more than just a think tank or work group. You have to look beyond that. Okay, I like what I'm hearing here. It has to go beyond a working group. Yes, indeed, because every institution participating has its own plans, and therefore a common platform is needed where ideas could be harmonized and where even part of those ideas could be implemented. But do we need any working groups or councils on our list? Or maybe we need a joint project? Well, if we're talking about the development of projects, in each stage of the project, the institutional mechanisms can be different, and the further we go, beyond the planning stage, through the implementing stage, the cooperation grows tighter and tighter. Okay, so we need different types of activities for each stage. What is Rail Baltica planning with regard to Pārdaugava? Now we know what the universities are aiming for, but we also know that the new rail line, Rail Baltica, will go across this part of the city. Does Rail Baltica takes into consideration the future knowledge center here? Is it included in your plans? Maybe I will start with some international background. Our Rail Baltica line will be connecting territories starting from Finland and up to Poland, and in these territories 2.6 people are students. This is a considerable number, and most of those people are in Poland, and the proximity of Rail Baltica to this new academic center would mean closer ties with students in other countries. And if we think locally, Rail Baltica is another part of infrastructure in this territory, which will be in a close proximity to the existing railway line, and this new infrastructure will serve as a catalyst that can facilitate good transportation solutions, combining different transportation modes of the city. Okay, so I thought that I didn't think that your scope was so wide. Is Rail Baltica going to have a railway stop in Pārdaugava? For instance, the station of Torņakalns. Will the Polish students be able to off-board the train in Pārdaugava? Well, we are thinking more about the international traffic right now, and we are currently closing our planning stage, and we are entering the designing stage, and currently I believe that we could create a better railway connection that would that would provide benefits to the entire transportation infrastructure, including this part, Pārdaugava. Did you know that the station here, Torņakalns, serves hundreds of people and hundreds of trains are passing through it? And we are going to have about 10,000 students at our Pārdaugava campus in the future, so there will be people at the Torņakalns station. So maybe we could use some shuttle approach that could take people to the center from here. Yes, Rail Baltica will definitely be connecting people, including those in Pārdaugava. Do you have any estimates how often would those trains have to go so that all the maintenance work would pay off? Yes, we are doing our research, and as regards the cost-benefit analysis, which is available publicly, you can find it on our website, so please take a look. But as regards the local transportation, it is still being planned, and soon we are starting a research that refers to the organizational plans of Rail Baltica related transportation. So, does that mean that those who live in Pārdaugava will be able to participate in the planning process? Yes. It is indeed a challenging project. And as regards the chances to participate in the planning process, Rail Baltica is one of the elements that has to be considered from different perspectives. But as regards the research I mentioned, it is more of a technical nature. And of course, in this research, you have to take into consideration the existing plans and the prospects for future, and that is what we are going to consider. Yes, I was talking about this because we already have our cyclist lane, and it makes a huge difference if you route the cyclist lane through one area or through the other area. And you have a cyclist lane planned through the Jelgavas street, and we are thinking of ways that would help to integrate all those researchers and students in the city, and the cycling lanes have to be planned accordingly. And do you think, have we lost anything by working on this renaissance of academic values here? Do you want a concrete answer? Well, answer as you wish. I would say that our Pārdaugava consists of many small locations, neighborhoods where people know one another, where people greet one another, people even protect one another if necessary. But unfortunately, we do not keep our doors unlocked for neighbors anymore, because the city is not that safe anymore. And there are many robberies, bicycles get stolen. And as regards the inhabitants of our neighborhood, Agenskalns, our inhabitants are worried about bicycle lanes that often disappear because the street markings, street painting often wears off, and people forget that the lane continues here. So I often have to tell cyclists where to find the continuation of the lane. I think it is not a good solution now. We have to create separate cyclist lanes that are fenced off from the street traffic. And We used to have traditions as regards shopping for groceries, for food. In our neighborhood, often new establishments, catering establishments appear. However, I'm worried that the market of our neighborhood, Agenskalna market, is slowly dying. It used to be a meeting point. People gathered around it, and I remember that on weekends we didn't go to shopping malls. We went on foot to this market, and currently locals do not do this anymore because the market is not the same. It is actually dead when compared to the historical one. And I'm thinking, are we going to make everything so impersonal? I would love to keep this individual nature of my neighborhood, those reasons why we love walking along our streets in the spring where the trees are blooming and so on. If we rob everything of personality and make the facades all the same, will it really be good? Okay, but if we look from the student's perspective, do you think that the housing options are good? Are rental apartments available? I think we addressed that already. As regards our neighborhoods, mostly two-story houses dominate, and among them, during this capitalist era, four-story buildings have been built, which is not very pleasant for those living in the old buildings. And then there are big Soviet-time residential houses, which are long past their exploitation end date, and the question is, when are they starting to collapse? So, prices are gradually rising for accommodation. Our children who would like to stay close to our family have to pay bigger fees, rental fees, and it often happens so that we try to free up space on our ground floors to furnish rental flats. Mr. Baumanis, would students want to live in rental apartments? I think your university is going to offer dormitories, but what about the rental apartments? I see that foreign students like to live, for instance, in the center of Riga on the Tērbatas street, but would they want to live in Pārdaugava, where there is no nightlife? From my experience, those studying with us usually try to find something close to the university or in the center of Riga. If we talk about the functionality, of course, the university was created during the Soviet time, and it was located where it was located. We cannot do anything about this. But we have big streets nearby, and we could think of better connections to those big streets, because there are many smaller streets that are as if getting extinct, and now transportation goes through those streets. We probably should think of some buffer area between this new university complex and people, the local inhabitants who have been living in the neighborhood for years, so they are not directly faced with those big crowds and big buildings. There is some added value of students living on campus, because for the nightlife, students can always travel to the old city center, but some social life comes into being on the campus as well. I could say that currently the old and cheap pubs are becoming extinct, and currently the stylish new establishments are being created. Willem? A question for you.
We're on the final leg of our panel before we open up for the discussion. We've got about 30,000 students, perhaps in 5 to 6 years. At this stage, they are mostly located in academic campuses. Do 4 large academic campuses with that amount of students, does that equal a knowledge territory? If yes, what should be our next step? A knowledge territory. I think an academic campus on its own is not a knowledge territory. It doesn't actually attract businesses and all those spillover effects as we know them. What should be our next step? What should be the top 3 things we should be doing if we would like to establish this area as a knowledge territory that is known at least in the Baltics, perhaps in Europe? That's probably a question for
I
a
want to be
whole day.
Really modest, because I really don't know the situation good enough. If you talk about numbers and campuses, but I would like to see them with my own eyes and see what's going on. But for me, knowledge territory is not per se about concentrations of campuses and universities. It is also a culture of how people behave and what they do together and so on. So for me, knowledge territory is one where people come out of their traditional silos and start to collaborate in new ways, like you see in Boston Innovation District, where really interesting mixes emerge between local people, inhabitants, companies and universities, where you see also new kind of buildings that are not a university building, not a company building, but something in between.
A public one.
Where you see all these kind of new things. But I was also intrigued by what you say about the change of the neighborhood. I can see, you see that in a lot of cities where suddenly the number of students increase a lot in the neighborhood. And you can see that the life of the student is different from the life of the people who live there for a long time. So if you suddenly come with a lot of new students in an area, you create a lot of alienation from the locals. And there you have to be careful. On the one hand, you know that you need to. The world is changing, and that maybe neighborhoods can change. But if the change is too fast and not planned, and people feel that they have nothing to say about it, that it happens, and then you create all sort of tensions that is unwanted. So here it's really a thin line. And another thing I wanted to know, because I didn't hear you talk about it, is how do you involve the students in the planning as such? Because I know that in Tampere, in Finland, they had this vision. They say, we want to be the best students' city of Scandinavia. That is their vision. And then they say, okay, how can we do that? So they created working groups. One was about internationalization, one was about campus development, one was about housing, and each working group had citizens, students, and professionals from planning and so on. Exactly. So that to me was like, okay, this is a way to gradually maybe develop things.
And this is exactly the point, and we're really coming to the near of the discussion here. Do you think that creation of that kind of culture that is open, that is adaptive, and not just about academia, should that be the task of the universities only, or should that include other parties, other stakeholders? And if yes, how do you see that kind of institution taking shape? And do you think that we have to have that kind of institution in place in order to ensure that kind of culture happening in the knowledge territory?
Yeah, this cannot only be done by the universities, because they tend to be a little bit conservative. They tend to have their own agenda. They tend to focus on their core business, which is research and education. Of course, it's normal.
So you
need to create intermediary organization platforms that do this, and then gradually you build a culture of more collaboration, and this cannot be done overnight. It takes a long time, and I don't know enough about your culture here, how it exactly works in this collaboration, but it's not easy. It's never easy, and you cannot force people to do things. So it is, you need to build it on consensus and build a vision together, and then if people believe in that vision and see there is something in it for them. Maybe they start to collaborate and build things, and it's a little bit of giving and taking. So there cannot be a central authority that is the boss in this kind of planning.
We're on a final round. Mums būs tagad pēdējais jautājums katram no jums.
Okay, and let us proceed to the final round. I have a question for each of you. What is one thing that you would like to see happening in the nearest year or 2 years? At least one thing you would like to see happening for this part of the city, so that the Pārdaugava does not become an academic ghetto, but is an interesting area for students and researchers. Okay. I can see our coordination panel here already establishing. Well, looking from the institutional development viewpoint, we really have an official coordinating body at the state level, but as regards the territorial planning, I think this planning process could serve as a good platform for involving society and for looking for the best solutions. So you are suggesting that we should use the existing instruments? Yes, but that is only one part of it. I already mentioned the instruments that we have, and they should be used in a rational manner. However, I think as regards this territory, we need a close institutional cooperation, because the interests, ideas, wishes are really manifold, and they go beyond individual initiatives and projects. Mr. Caune, are you ready to welcome us to your coordination body? I cannot answer that right now, because there are concrete parties involved in that. But I think what is important here, we have to understand that the public sector has to work together with the non-governmental organization, with private companies. Are they represented in your coordination body? Well, I cannot answer this right now. In this case, the official coordination body that our company is working with is a joint initiative, but I could recommend considering different platforms in order to achieve the involvement of different parties. Mr. Baumanis, you asked about the next 1 or 2 years. I think institutionally it would be important for the government, for the ministry, to think jointly about the export of the higher education. And in this context, maybe during the following year, we could think about reconsidering our transportation solutions in Pārdaugava. I think there are chances for real investments. Madam Kiopa, I'm afraid I have 3 things to say. Oh, you are generous. Yes, I will return to the forum of leaders that we mentioned. I do not know how viable this idea would be. I think we definitely should organize cooperation among different kinds of leaders to see what is the general direction going to be. And I think that these have to be successful leaders that would be capable of creating a joint agency that could market the future development. Do you think of including only representatives of profitable companies? No. I'm just thinking that we should invite people who can be active, who can carry out things. And another thing, I think a company or an organization should be created that would develop the rental housing market, so that students have an opportunity to open a website and see a list of reliable rental companies, a list of reliable hosts, and so that they could see that, yes, here I can get an apartment with 4 bedrooms, for instance. And this is a real business opportunity for people like Arvīds as well, who are looking for ways to free some space in their house for rental accommodation. And so that they could host some students and have some cultural exchange. Arvīds, you have created a Facebook community. It's good to live in Agenskalns. It's the title of this community. Does this community have a voice? You represent this internet community and it is very active. Yes, we now have 5 Facebook pages for our neighborhood, and there are neighborhood pages for the neighborhoods close to us. And I'm moderating one of the oldest communities or pages. And I'm the moderator, so I can switch off everyone who tries to contradict me. That was a joke. I love students who are polite. I love universities more than shopping malls, and I rather visit a university than a shopping malls. And I have a small request. Please do not proceed as you did with the construction of this library. You had a large project, a century project, but then someone in the government thought that they could save money here, so they decided to make the roof smaller. They decided they would not be building an underground garage, parking space, and they tried to save on many things. And these were not real savings, actually. All these things, all these amenities were in fact taken away from us. So when you plan future projects, please do not plan them at the expense of the locals. Plan them in a way so that you have space for your own car and for the locals. Stop stealing from us. Mr. Zeps, I think we now have to talk about establishing a coordinating platform, be it an agency or a company. And we have to reach a point where everyone becomes interested. And as regards this territorial development, we have to address both internationalization, student housing, and many other aspects. So, dear audience, do you have any questions? We are slightly lagging behind our schedule, unfortunately, but still, we have a chance to ask questions. Let us throw the catch box. You have to had your lunch. You're probably sleeping now after the lunch. Do you hear me? My name is Dirts. And I have a question for Mr. Zeps. I heard you mentioning the notions of innovations. Can you say how many innovative companies have come into being because of your university, and what is their turnaround, how many millions? Well, I could say that since 2014, we have a strategy where we have the number of companies we are working on as one of the indicators, and currently these companies reach 34. And our researchers have worked on many companies, and one of the startups that has emerged by attracting capital is a company that checks the purity of water in just 5 minutes. And they can provide a faster solution than the specialized laboratories. Okay, any other questions? My name is Andris. First of all, I'm surprised that the University of Latvia is not represented here. But then we would have 7 people here. 6 is many already. My question goes like this. How can we make this joint platform or body successful? How can we make them work in a coordinated manner, work towards one aim? Because the current experience shows that those bodies start soon being thrown apart by the different interests of the participants. Okay, are there ways we could achieve this? Agrita? I'll be saying this for the 3rd time, I think. We have to address leaders, because each interested party has someone who really cares about the issue. Each interested party has people who really find the issue important, and we have to address them. And I have to add that leaders often have to be accountable towards their staff and towards their shareholders. However, leaders are also the ones who are trusted. Are there any other questions? Gunter's my name. I would like to use the opportunity to use this innovative microphone. I represent the city council, and Mr. Van Winden already said that all those students have to enter the neighborhoods very carefully, because it is a thin line and you can ruin things. However, when I was listening to Mr. Dravnieks, his sad arguments about the neighborhood development, I wanted to ask him, do you see any positive aspects to thousands of people coming to your neighborhood? Can you find any pros, any benefits? Can you believe that the housing problem, for instance, will be solved in the most sustainable way? I always hope that one object is built, all the neighboring infrastructure, public transportation, and many other things will be improved, and I sincerely hope that you will do this in this case. Arvīd, I wanted to note that if we get the necessary number of students, it will serve as an argument to create for instance, the bicycle lanes we need. Well, this is a matter of mutual respect, and I find it strange that I have to remind about such simple things. Okay, colleagues, are there any other questions? My name is Inta, and I have a question to the representative of the Technical University. I am myself a graduate of the school, and I am a territorial planner myself. And have you foreseen any cooperation with the Riga Technical University in this future project? Because this university prepares architects, road construction specialists, and many other useful people. You mean the development of this territory, right? I would say that there are already aspects in which we are cooperating. For instance, as regards the technical matters of the Riga City Council, such as the street lighting and matters relating to the intensity of transportation. So there are already points of cooperation, and we would like to continue this cooperation. In universities, there are programs for social sciences, for spatial sciences, and I know that this conversation, many representatives are participating here, and we are thinking about another project connecting another neighborhoods. My name is Artūrs, and I have a comment here. To our university representatives, maybe some 5 years are going to pass before all those students come here. Do you have any statistical data or any idea how many of those students could remain in Riga? And I mean mostly Western students, or maybe students from third countries such as India or elsewhere. Are there chances that they could remain in Riga and contribute to Riga? Would you like to see this happening? Of course. And I think that would be one of the positive effects. The links we could establish, the connections we could establish would be beneficial in long term. In our house of the parliament, there is one representative whose name is Hossam Abu Meri, and he was a student himself here, and he stayed. There is also a student from India in one of the towns of Latvia, but there are not many students like this, and I think it is because of the salary level here in Latvia. But I think it is likely to change in the future. Do you plan to facilitate the situation where these all students remain in Riga and continue working here? Well, what I'm saying is that these foreign students are getting better at learning Latvian, and for instance, medicine students can complete their studies and stay here. However, it is very closely related to the economic conditions in the country. Mr. Auers already said that our country needs 3,000 IT specialists. However, our schools can produce only 700 a year. Do businessmen address you and look for the local specialists? Yes, of course. However, with IT specialists, you could use remote solutions as well. But when we look at the projections of the Ministry of Economy, we can see that about 16,000 engineers are going to be needed in the future, and the question is how many of our students are really going to graduate their studies. But we have to find ways of motivating them to stay here. Is salary the only way to motivate them? Well, there are many aspects. Conditions of living, the perspectives of finding a work, a job, and if they find a job here, we have better chances that they would stay here after their graduation. If I may add, this is a matter of migration policy. Some time ago, we issued a lot of residential permits, but now all these people are gone. And if a student came here and came here for work, he or she would maybe stay here. So you say that our institutions need to be more welcoming. Yes, that's right. Any other questions? I have another comment regarding the urban environment. We are talking a lot about the accessibility, interconnectedness, but as regards the neighborhood of the Zunda Canal, there was a huge transportation node developed. However, currently the situation has deteriorated because of that transportation node, and Mr. Dravnieks already mentioned all the savings as regards the National Library. There were many links planned, connections planned, but these were not implemented in the real life. Only the library itself was built. And as regards the railway, many of the rail tracks are now left empty. They are not actually used. So it would appear logical to me if Rail Baltica project used some of the actual rail tracks without building everything from the scratch. However, we are unable to cooperate, and currently it appears that we are building new things instead of using the old ones properly. And the same refers to our railway bridge. We're planning to build a new bridge and use the old bridge as a pedestrian bridge. So you think that there is some incongruence between the solutions offered and the real needs, right? I have an answer here. If Rail Baltica crosses the neighborhood of Agenskalns and Torņakalns, we are going to party on the tracks, I would say. We are going to organize our neighborhood parties there. Are your students satisfied with the accessibility of Pārdaugava? Is it easy for them to come here by bicycle, on foot? We have heard comments regarding bicycle parking possibilities, and we have heard comments about how grumpy people are here, that people speak poor English, for instance. Yes, there are problems, bicycle lanes, and also we have problems with the big transportation streets that go past our campus, and they have to be crossed on foot, which is difficult. Dear colleagues, the last minute, are there any other questions? Yes, you. Okay. My name is Māra Kalvāne. I am a territorial planner, and dear university representatives, have you thought of attracting private companies to the development of student dormitories? Because I know that they are actually interested in participating, especially as regards this new knowledge territory in Pārdaugava. I don't know why I don't see any representatives from the Riga transportation companies here or the Latvian Railway, because they are also stakeholders here. Maybe they could take care of connections between the new campus and the Riga city center. Yes, of course, we are considering the private-public partnership in building the dormitories. And yes, it is on our agenda. I could tell you that there are different types of developers. There are the so-called space travelers, dreamers, realists, and the revenue you can get from students are not that big to attract, for instance, venture capital. And we addressed our Minister of Economics and asked for some subsidies. Unfortunately, these negotiations were not successful. And there are also local developers who have great projects. They are trying to sell their ideas, but unfortunately their prices are too high. And then it dawns upon them that they could join forces with us. And there was one instance when a company came and was ready to invest money and build, and currently the dormitories of this company are full. They are filled completely with students. I have a question that is partially based on the previous questions, and these are mainly to Mr. Zeps. As regards the transportation development in the vicinity of the Riga Technical University, this university is trying to consolidate its objects, its buildings. However, some buildings are still located in the city center, and some students are living outside the campus and are traveling to the university. And there are the accessibility is not that good for the university. So are you, when you're working on your development vision, are you thinking about transportation solutions as well? And are you harmonizing these ideas with the Riga City Council transportation development department? Well, I could say that we are not planning to build a bridge just for us, but we are planning to centralize our buildings around Ķīpsala, which is another neighborhood of Pārdaugava, and we are going to concentrate our development there. Our dormitories will be located there, and infrastructure in this neighborhood is very important for us. Not only the transportation as such, but also pedestrian lanes and the bicycle lanes. So this is also on our agenda. We can already see some progress, but there is still room for improvement. And should this be included in the future development plan? Yes, definitely. And yes, Mr. Dravnieks asks about one particular spot in the Riga city which needs to be fixed. Yes, we already addressed the Riga city company regarding this, but they said it is not our responsibility. So we would like to improve the situation there, but we can't. Dear colleagues, I think at this point we say thank you to our panelists. Thank you a lot.